Go to a lot of museums.
Yes.
And then we went to watch Sight and Sound.
To watch what?
Sight and Sound. It's like
Oh, okay.
yeah.
It was good. You enjoyed it?
Yeah.
Very good. Well, I'm glad you had a good one. Good job. Hello. What's up, Miss Everly? Hey, Emerson. Everybody had a good weekend? How'd your auditions go? Yeah? All done? When do you find out? Oh, okay. So,
I got her sister and a
Ariel's sister and a princess. Excellent. How about you?
sister, princess, and boys.
Sister princess and then a voice. Very good. Outstanding. That sounds good. You excited about it? Yeah? Will look like a good script. You're doing the musical, right? So you'll have singing to do. Very good. Very, very good. Well, I like to hear that. That is good news. Evan was globe trotting for the last week, all over the eastern seaboard, I suppose. Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good. Well, that's fun. I'm glad everybody had a good time. Well, everybody's
When
here.
we went to Washington, my mom was really scared because like they usually have shootings there.
Yeah, they've had some issues there. Now they have different issues there. They just have lots of issues there.
And we went to like a town and then she was like, why are there police here?
National Guard's in Washington right now. It's a thing. Yeah.
We saw the F3.
Oh, did you? Well, that's kind of cool though, to say you saw that. That's pretty neat. Pretty neat. At least you can say you saw it. You were there when, right? Did you go, did you do any museums? What'd you do?
There's like a plane museum.
Oh, yes, okay. Yeah, Aerospace Museum. Yeah. The Enola Gay is there, right? The bomber from World War II. Yeah, I've been there. It's really cool, isn't it? We had we had the wildest.
Space.
Yeah, there's a space shuttle there. Which one is it? Do you remember? Is it Columbia? It's not, no, not Columbia. That blew up. It's Endeavor. It's one of them is there. I don't know. It's pretty cool though. I remember when we went, we had this old man come up when we were looking at the Enola Gay. The Enola Gay is the plane that dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? And when we were there, this random old man came up, and he was not an official tour guide. He was just somebody who knew a lot about the plane and the bombing. And he talked to us for like 10 minutes and shared these really cool, like personal stories about the people who worked on the plane and the pilots and like all this stuff. It was really, I mean, we lucked out. We had a cool guy there with us. It was pretty neat. Well, before we start, I'm gonna give you guys a heads up just so you know, and then I'll tell everybody again before we go out for lab today. But I pulled something in my lower back yesterday, so I'm very slow at like bending or turning. I don't know what I did. I tried to destroy myself somehow. Getting old is not fun. So I'm like, ugh, today. We'll get there. We will figure it out. All right, so we are on ecology, ecosystems, populations, things like this. We are moving right along. It will go great with our outdoor lab today, and then we have a quick indoor paper lab today. So we have two labs kind of squished into one lab today, and it'll be fun. We'll have a lot to do. All right, so we will start by looking at this, which is probably going to look familiar to you. I think you have something pretty similar in your. I am not going to bend over and get it. Pretty similar in your binder. Okay, so producers take in carbon dioxide. What's an example of a producer? Who can tell me? Like, look out the window. What producer do you see out there? What you got, Emerson?
Tree.
The trees. That's a good one. Okay. So producers take in carbon dioxide. What do consumers release? Go ahead, everything. Carbon dioxide again. Yes, you are a consumer. You release carbon dioxide, don't you? All right. So let's see if we can match these types of consumers to their diet. So we talked the other day about there's different ways to group consumers. You can say, first level or second level consumers, but you can also just group them by kind of the categories as to what they eat. So herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, and scavengers. We could also dump decomposers in there as another subcategory. But so let's have a look. What do herbivores eat? Which of these answers do you think is going to be correct for that one? What do you think, Evan?
Um,
Not sure?
yeah.
Go for it. Give it a guess.
Eats both plants and meat.
That one's not going to be herbivore, but you're clear. Do you know, Everly? Plants. Okay, there you go. All right. Good guess, though. Good guess. Okay, so herbivore. And if you look, that ivore, that goes with eating, right? Because all of them have it. Well, except for scavenger. So herb right there tells you what's an herb. What's an herb? It's a plant, right? So herbivore tells you it's going to be a plant. You can also refer to things as herbaceous, which meaning it's like plant material, right? So that's where you see the word, the root herb in a lot of things. How about a carnivore? What's a carnivore eat? Emerson? Meat, right? What's the Spanish word for meat? Have you gotten there yet? No? It's gonna, you ever been on a menu and seen carne asada on a menu? There's your carne again, right? So carne meaning meat or beef, I think in that case, actually, specifically. But yes, so there you see meat eater. Okay, omnivore, Evan.
Eats both plants.
There you go. It's both plant. Omni meaning all, right? We use the word omnipresent. You ever heard of omnipresent? What do you suppose that would mean? If omni means all, then what would omnipresent mean?
All places.
Yeah, everywhere all the time, right? Omnipresent. You could use that in a way to describe like maybe if there's a bad okay, like during COVID, boredom was omnipresent. A lot of people were bored all the time, everywhere. There's also omniscient and omnipotent, all knowing and all powerful, potent meaning power. So omnipotent and omniscient meaning all knowing. All right, and how about scavenger? It's our last one, Everly. Consumes dead things, yes. And last week we gave examples of scavengers that live here as like those turkey vultures, yellow jackets, things of that sort. So the most energy is available at the consumer portion at the top of the energy pyramid. So that's not true, right? Because we said the most energy is available at the bottom, the least energy at the tippy top of the pyramid. So remember, you have grass, and the mouse eats the grass, and the hawk eats the mouse. The grass is the most energy. By the time it gets up to the top of your little chain or your little pyramid, why is there less energy? If we know energy is conserved, because there's a law of conservation of energy, right? Energy is neither created nor destroyed, it only changes form. So if the grass has, let's say, 1,000 kilocalories of energy, and then the mouse that eats the grass, he only takes in 100 kilocalories of that, but by the time it gets to the hawk, it's only 10 kilocalories. What happens to that energy? Where does it go? Gets used by things that are eating it, but where does it go? It gets lost as heat, right? You give off heat, don't you? Every one of you gives off heat, right? It's a product of our reaction of aerobic cellular respiration. So we give off heat, the little mouse gives off heat, and in doing so, in giving off heat, that's energy that was in the grass initially. If you ate a steak last night and you're sitting there producing heat on the couch, that heat came from the grass, right? Because it came from the cow, from the grass, right? So it gets lost as heat energy. And what are our four forms of precipitation? Go ahead.
No.
Very good. Rain, snow, hail, sleet are forms of precipitation, right? There you go. So water can fall from the sky in any of those forms. Does anybody remember the difference between like hail and sleet? When do we get hail and sleet? Winter, summer? Which comes when? Do you know? So sleet comes in the winter, and it's when the little ice droplets are on their way down and they freeze on their way down. And because of different things, the amount of moisture in the air, the pressure, they don't come down as snow, it comes down as little ice pellets. That's sleet, right? Or freezing rain. What then is hail? Do you remember what hail is? Anybody know? Do you know?
Ice blocks.
Yeah, it's like ice blocks. So what happens with hail is up in the clouds, it's in the summer. It's very cold up there. it doesn't look it when the sun's beating down on us in the summer and it's 90 degrees down here, but it's very cold up there in the sky where the clouds are. That's why the water's all condensed, right? You can see it, you can see the clouds. So what happens is you'll get a water droplet and it'll kind of start to fall, but then the wind from the storm will kick it back up into the cloud, and where it freezes and gets another layer of water on it. So it keeps going up and down and getting extra layers of, it's like a snowball rolling down a hill, but instead it's going in a cycle through a cloud, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and gets more and more layers of water on it till it gets so heavy that it has to fall. And that's why we get hail. And that's why I got a new roof last month, because hail damaged it. If you take a hailstone and cut it in half like on a saw, you can actually see the layers. It's kind of like, you ever had an everlasting gobstopper? The Willy Wonka everlasting gobstoppers. You ever had one? You keep sucking it, it's different colors as you go. Yeah, if you cut it in half, you can see all those colors. All right, so let's talk about biogeography. What do you suppose that word means? What do you think, Everly?
Well,
Life and geography together, yeah. So bio is life. What does geo mean? Earth, yeah. And graphy usually means writing or creating a record of. So here we are creating a record of, or writing a record of, life on Earth is biogeography. So it's the branch of biology that deals with geographical distribution of plants and animals. So where are they located? Do we have kangaroos wild in Georgia? Do they live in the woods? If I go out there, can I find a kangaroo? No. Where do I find the kangaroos?
Australia.
Australia. That's biogeography. They're there. No kangaroos here. We do have one marsupial in North America. Does anybody know what it is? It's the Virginia opossum. Let me see a little possum outside. Little possums. There are only marsupials. We'll talk about that more later this year. So continental drift. So there's this dude, Alfred Wegener, and we talk about him a lot in earth science, which is next year's course. But he is the first one that proposed a hypothesis for what we now call continental drift in 1912. So he supported his idea with 4 main points. So his idea here is that all of the continents were once one giant landmass, and then they split apart, right? So his ideas were that they fit together like a puzzle. Can you see that? They do kind of fit together like a puzzle, don't they? So he's like, hey, they're all the right shapes. They fit together like a puzzle. Paleoclimate indicators. So things like evidence of glaciation. So maybe there was a glacier that ran. See where that orange line is, where it says that fossil for that particular animal? Maybe it was also a glacier that ran, and you see that track from that glacier geographically when you're looking at that kind of study. You can see it and tell, well, this is probably the same giant lake of ice that moved across this piece of land, but now this land is in 2 different places and there's ocean between them. He also talked about truncated geologic features like similar rocks found in South America and Africa. You can actually find similar rocks in the Appalachian area, like where we are just north of us, and like over in England and Scotland too, because those areas were actually at one point very close together. And he also talked about fossil distribution. So this is really important for biology. So it's evidence that species are living in areas that are now too cold or where water might have been. So if you look right here, look at this little guy at the bottom of the blue. It says fossil remains of a freshwater reptile called Mesosaurus. So Mesosaurus is found in all of those areas that are blue. Now, Mesosaurus could not have swum from one side to the other. We know that based on its makeup, its features. So Mesosaurus, those pieces of land must have touched for Mesosaurus to be on both of those continents now, bottom of Africa, South America. And if you look, there's even better option. Look at the green. So it's Glossiopteris, that particular fern. And if you look, that fern is found in that part of Australia, that part of Antarctica, and all the way down to South America. The fern has 0 chance of swimming from Australia to South America. So those pieces of land must have touched each other. Now, here's the thing with Wegener. Alfred Wegener came up with this idea, and this is how he supported his idea. And the problem was, people looked at him and said, you're out of your mind. You're crazy, and you can't prove it. You have no way to prove it aside from these. This is all, it's interesting but you're not showing me a method for how they would move. And that's his thing. He's like, the continents moved apart, and that people were like, how? Tell me how the continents moved apart. And he could not explain how they moved. So his theory didn't catch a lot of attention, and it didn't really take off until World War One, I believe it was. So there were ships that would cross the Atlantic Ocean, and they used testing tools that could test the magnetic fields on the floor of the ocean. Right, that's what they were doing. They were like kind of mapping and paying attention. And this is pretty wild, but down the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, there's this mid-Atlantic ridge. Have y'all heard of this? There's this big ridge down the middle of the Atlantic Ocean where it's like it kind of makes a mountain there, but at the top of the mountain, there's like a big ditch like this, right? So what they've discovered is that the rocks that form there, and what it is it's two plates of the earth that are moving away from each other. And as they move away from each other, it's because you got nice hot rocks from the mantle, right? And they come up and then they cool and they get pushed out by more that's coming up. And so it just kind of keeps spreading from the middle. All right. But our North Pole and our South Pole have a magnetic pole, right? But throughout history, they have changed. So magnetic North and magnetic South have rotated throughout millions and millions of years. Not in any recorded human lifespan. It's been that long. But they do every so often go flip, and the magnetic poles split. The rocks on the bottom of the ocean, and we talk about this in our science, the rocks on the bottom of the ocean actually show those magnetic changes. They'll be like positive, negative, negative, positive, positive, negative, and you can see every time the poles have switched. So that's how we prove that Wegener was right. The continents were all attached at one point. So we talk about species dispersal. So among both plants and animals, dispersal usually takes place at the time of reproduction. And how do we define dispersal? Do you know? Does anybody have a definition for what the word dispersal means? So it's the movement of an individual or an organism from their birthplace to other locations for breeding. There are some animals like salmon that will swim back to where they were born in order to breed. And then they go on about their day. But other organisms will breed in different places, and that causes different populations to grow. So yesterday when I was outside setting up the plots for lab today, I found a wild passion fruit growing along the fence line back here. And I'm very excited because we call them maypops here in the South, but it's a type of passion fruit. They're tasty. And I've never been able to get one because I've seen them in the wild, but I've never been able to get one of the fruit because every time I've ever seen them, it's like in a park or something and it's never right. But I get to kind of watch those now. We didn't plant that. And that probably got there because some bird somewhere probably ate a maypop and pooped the seed over here. And now I've got a maypop on my fence line, which is pretty cool. So different means for dispersal. So seeds can travel in different ways. You all know what dandelion seeds do, right? They get those little puff balls and you can blow them and they float. That's how dandelion seeds and milkweed. There's a lot of milkweed out there today. You'll see some out back if you're beyond the gate. And then maple. Anybody call those helicopters? Sometimes when I was a kid, we call those helicopters. You drop them and they go. Oh, but if it's windy, they really move, right? So the whole purpose of this is to take your offspring and move it further away from you so as to spread out your population. And then there's different kinds of, so that's how that's how wind dispersal works. Then you've got dispersal by animals. So look there, you've got little burrs, different types of burrs. Those beggar ticks are a type of burr. And then you've also got blackberries. So that's different. The burrs travel because they get stuck to an animal. They get stuck to an animal's skin or fur, and then the animal will move that burr, which has the seeds in it, to another location where that plant can grow. So now its offspring is spread out. Whereas in a blackberry, it's just like that maypop. If the birds or the squirrels or the chipmunks eat my blackberries, they're going to take them somewhere else and then they're going to poop them somewhere different. And then that's going to be babies, little baby blackberries. So that's how they spread. Then you got some that spread by water. Did you know that coconuts are meant to be spread by water? That's why that's the outside of a coconut. Like you have to rip that shell off to get to the little brown hairy part inside. That's like the nut. But they float. Cattails will float, and lotus blossoms those little seeds will float as well. And then you've got by bursting open, you have some plants that just kind of pop open and drop their seeds. There are some that when they pop, they actually pop with force and they throw their seeds. It's really kind of cool. And then humans, look at all the things that we move around. We move around beans, wheat, cherries, and we plant them. But we also, if you're eating cherries outside, you're probably spitting the pits around, aren't you? I do. Or watermelon. You're outside at a picnic, you're eating watermelon, you probably spit the seeds out. There's a way that you're dispersing those plants. So we have wind, water, animals, and humans are an animal, right? So limitation of species dispersal include things like this. Physical barriers. This is what we're talking about with Wegener. He said, this is a physical barrier these species could not have crossed. Therefore, this land must have been touching at some point. But if it's not touching now, you can't. So these guys cannot reach each other because there is a physical barrier in between, right? And that's why we don't have kangaroos, because they cannot swim all the way around the world to get to us, right? That's a big physical barrier. And it's not just water, sometimes it's mountains. There are parts of the Pacific Northwest that don't have any venomous snakes because they can't get there, because the mountains and the temperature at the top of the mountains is too difficult for them to crawl all the way over and then down. So we don't get them there. Then you can have competition, all right? So if you've got competition, you hear, we'll talk about Darwinism and survival of the fittest and whatever, but you ever seen videos of like male mountain sheep or whatever, or rams that like bang into each other, and they bang their horns and their heads into each other, and they do that, and it's a way of saying, I'm the biggest, best male. And since I'm the biggest, best male, I get to breed and the rest of you males don't. So that male gets to produce offspring and the others don't.
I like to see that.
It's pretty cool. And another thing, and giraffes will do it too. Male giraffes will do it, but they literally whip each other with their necks. It's the craziest thing. They will whip their necks around and smack each other with their necks and their heads.
Is it on YouTube?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's pretty wild. So there's competition for mates, but there's also competition for food. And in this case, you've got these two vultures fighting over this rack of ribs. So if you've got a bigger, stronger vulture, he's probably going to be able to get more food. And the little weak vulture may not get the food because he may not be strong enough to fight for it. And he might starve and die. So that means that his offspring are not going to get dispersed because he's not going to make any. He's going to die. And then you have climate. So we're talking about climate versus weather, but this is climate. If you get to a place that's too cold, if you have an extraordinary climate change, or we go through an ice age or something like that, then you might have a problem. A species might not be able to survive the change in climate if it's drastic enough. General day-to-day changes, things can survive. So, sorry. There's our great example of all these interesting animals that live in Australia that don't live anywhere else because they can't go anywhere else. They're kind of stuck there, right? Too much water all the way around them. Islands are great places to live if they're far enough away. I mean, Australia is a continent, but it's the smallest continent. It's an island, and those species are specific to that island because they have nowhere else to go. So it's really kind of a good place to look for diversity. So you've got your other types of, when we talk about competition, we talked about competition for breeding, competition for food. So you have inter and intra species. Do you know the difference between inter and intra? So the interstate highway system goes from state to state. Do you know?
Well, like different animals.
Yes. So intra means one white-tailed deer versus another white-tailed deer. And inter might mean a white-tailed deer versus a black bear, right? So different species. So intra is within and inter is between. So the interstate system goes from, if you get on I-85, Interstate 85, and go north, you're going to go through South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, right? You're going from state to state. It's in between states. But intra would be just within Georgia. Like if we had certain systems that never left the state, we'd call those intra, right? So here you got two rhinos, they're fighting, two some type of deer, I'm not sure, they're fighting, and two seagulls, and they're fighting. Okay, and they could be fighting for food resources. The reason animals compete, especially within a species, is for resources. So those resources are food, water, and mates. So those deer could be fighting for a mate, those rhino could be fighting for a mate, or they could be fighting over food or water. interspecies competition. So that's a great example of them at the top with a stake. If there's a zebra that's just been taken down, let's say the female lionesses do the hunting, right? The lionesses, the females, they do the hunting, they pack hunt, and they will kill a zebra. And while they're eating the zebra and the male lion comes up and decides, well, they've got dinner for me, so I'm going to eat, that hyena might show up and decide he wants to eat too. And hyenas will come in and try and steal the meat from the lions. Well, then the lions are going to fight the hyenas. So that's interspecies, sorry, or interspecific competition. So intraspecific and interspecific, or interspecies. And then you got, obviously, they're working with water issues there, and they're eating grass down here at the bottom. So competition is when organisms compete for limited resources like food, territory, mates. It can be members of the same species, which is intraspecific, or between different species, which is interspecific. Competition is a negative interaction because both parties are negatively affected. If you have to compete, you have to expend energy. Okay, so if you're that lion and you have to compete for that zebra steak, you have to expend energy, which means you're losing to a degree. But the hyena that competes for the steak is also losing for the degree. You're just gambling that you're going to win more than you lose, but you don't always, because you have to put out energy in either case. Whereas if that steak was just sitting there and nobody was competing with you, it would be completely positive. You'd get all the steak energy and move on, right? All right, so let's talk about climate versus weather. Weather is what you get. Climate is what you expect. So weather conditions are those in the atmosphere over a short period of time. Weather changes throughout the day, the week, the month, changes with seasons, right? And it can change within minutes or hours. It can be storming on Saturday and it's sunny on Sunday. And climate is the atmosphere, how it behaves over a long period of time, many, many years. And the average regional weather pattern over decades and decades. So we'll take lots of time and we'll go, what are the average patterns? That's your climate. All right, so let's talk about some invasive species. That's fun. Look at that guy. Does he look like something that grew up here in Georgia? Was born and raised all the way, and his ancestors all the way back? Nope. Neither is that, and neither are those. So we have here the tegu lizard came from Argentina. He probably hitchhiked on a ship or a plane, probably a ship, and came over with some Argentinian goods or produce. And now he's been found milling around the metro Atlanta area. And if you've got more than one, and they're near each other, they'll find each other, and then they'll make babies, and then you'll have a whole population of them. Little harder with a big lizard to do that, right? But he has been spotted here. The next one we have is the brown marmorated stink bug. He came from Vietnam, somewhere Southeast Asia, and he landed over here. He does not belong. He looks like our local indigenous stink bug, but he's not. And he's been a real pain. I've gotten them in my house. They're gross. And then what's that one at the bottom? Does anybody know what he is? That is a Joro spider, and they're from East Asia too. They're from Vietnam. Now, here's the only good thing about the Joro spider. The Joro spider came about 4 years ago, and he came after the stink bug. He actually does eat the stink bug. That stink bug is prey for that Joro spider. This Joro spider will eat our local stink bugs too, but he will eat this stink bug. And interestingly enough, our birds and our other predators do not eat that stink bug. They don't recognize it as something that's food for them, but he does. So that's the only good thing about this invasive species, is that he eats that invasive species. So invasive species don't belong. They are invading the area. So let's talk about biomes, terrestrial and aquatic. So the term boreal forest tends to mean the more southern part of the biome, while the term taiga tends to mean the more northerly part of the biome, where it transitions into tundra. And that is applicable to the northern hemisphere. If it were the southern hemisphere, we would be reversing those. And we would say if there were taiga down there, and there really isn't, but if there were, it would be towards the south because that's towards the pole. So really it should say the taiga tends to be more towards the poles, and the boreal forest tends to be more towards the equator. So these are our different types of terrestrial biomes. So let's look at the rainforest here. 2 types of rainforests. You have tropical rainforests, and that's where they're usually along the equator. That's where it's warm, it's wet, It rains a lot pretty much all year. There's 3 levels. There's a canopy, an understory, and a floor. And they're all different, like, kind of ecosystems within those different 3 levels. And then you have what are called temperate rainforests. Those are cooler, found near coastal areas further north or south of the equator. So,
I think,
it might be. There's a lot of stuff out there. I saw a wasp out there this morning who was just buzzing around. So, anybody want to guess where the world's 3 largest rainforests are? What you think, Evan?
the Amazon?
Amazon. Okay, there you go. That is our number 1. It is 5.5 million square kilometers. It is huge, and it's tropical, and it's located right there. The next one would be Congolese rainforest, and that's going to be right there. And you can see how much smaller it is. Look, 5.5 square kilometers to roughly 1.8 square kilometers. Much smaller. So that shows you how giant the Amazon rainforest is. And the last one is what we call the New Guinea rainforest. And it's kind of this general area right over here. And it's 288,000. So again, considerably smaller. But if you look, do you see how they're all in a line? And that's where the equator exists. They're all right along the equator. But look up there at the top of the United States. What's that up there? You see rainforest up there? We have rainforests in the Pacific Northwest, and that's a temperate rainforest. That's where you see the big sequoia trees and things like that. That's where they exist. So that's different. It's a different type of rainforest, but it's a rainforest. Then we have.
So is it the Everglades of rainforest?
The Everglades, yeah, if you go back and look, do you see Florida? It's still green. So it's still technically a type of rainforest, yes. So taiga. All right, now the taiga, which we also call the boreal forest, or is lots of vegetation composed of cone-bearing or needle-leaved or scale-leaved evergreen trees. This is all pine forests and things of similar nature. Found in the northern circumpolar, meaning going around the pole, circumpolar, forest regions characterized by long winters and moderate to high annual precipitation. So they've got a decent amount of rain. The taiga means land of little sticks in Russian, and it takes its name from a collective term for northern rainforest of Russia, especially Siberia. So where's the world's largest taiga? There it is. Where is that? What part of the world are we looking at right there on the map?
Russia?
Russia. Yeah, Russia. So in Russia is the world's largest taiga. It stretches 5,800 kilometers, which is 3,600 miles, from the Pacific Ocean to the Ural Mountains. That is a huge taiga, and much of that is not very useful. You can't farm there. It's not really good for living. You heard of Siberia as being like a way far out place? That's where you'll find Siberia. Siberia is in that part of the world. There's not a whole lot there. It's almost desert-like, and then it can be kind of barren. It's just very cold, but there are trees. And the taiga region was completely glaciated, covered by glaciers during the last ice age. The soil beneath the taiga contains what we call permafrost. It is permanently frozen soil. And because of that, a lot of things won't live there that will live other places. Temperate deciduous forest. Well, look at that. Where do we live? What's our biome? We now know it's a temperate deciduous forest. Are we right there? We are right there, right? Temperate deciduous forest. Temperate means kind of moderate in the middle. Deciduous means trees drop their leaves. So it's a biome that has deciduous trees which drop their leaves in the fall. Now, not all of our leaves fall, right? We've got pine trees and evergreens that don't lose their leaves. But all those poplars you see out there and the maples and the oaks, they drop their leaves, don't they? So that means it is a deciduous. Deciduous means trees that drop leaves. So they have wide, flat leaves. Temperate deciduous forests lie in mid-latitude areas of Earth between Arctic poles and the tropics. Your Arctic pole is up there, and your tropics are along the equator. These forests are in between. The temperate deciduous forests are in between. Winters are cold, summers are warm, and we have 4 seasons, 4 distinct seasons. Notice that Florida is not included. Florida doesn't have much of a winter. I mean, it has a winter, but it's not like the winter you're going to get in Vermont or Pennsylvania, right? It's going to be warmer most of the year. They will occasionally get some snow and stuff, but it's not common, right? And even down where we are, we're closer to Florida, so we get less snow, less stuff. Our winters are cold, but they're not as cold as the winters up in, like, Maine, for example, where it gets real cold.
But it doesn't snow. This is too much water.
Yeah, coastal Maine. Yeah, if you move in a little bit, it will. But like coastal Maine, the air's the air's warmer because of the ocean. Yep. So the largest temperate deciduous forest is in the eastern part of North America. You live in the world's largest temperate deciduous forest. Do you know Atlanta is called the city in a forest because it has more tree cover than any other major city in the United States? Go figure. There are other big cities in that range, but most of them have cut down their trees. So here's the thing, though. Most of our deciduous forest was completely destroyed and deforested by 1850 for agricultural purposes. If you look at that area all around us, you ever go out for a drive in the country, you see lots of farms, right? Lots of land that's just grass or just corn or soybean or whatever they're growing. That's not normal. It would have looked like that. But we have cut all the trees down because this is also good land for farming. We get lots of rain, we get lots of sun. It's great land for farming, and therefore we have deforested most of our particular biome. Go figure. Kind of sad. And then we have our grasslands. So our grasslands consist of large open areas of grass. So when you see big grassy areas out in the country when you're driving around Georgia, those are not grasslands. That's temperate deciduous forest that's been deforested. So you get these big open areas. You have savannas, and they are tropical. So that purple area there. And they get the most precipitation falls during just a few months of the year. And then you have long dry seasons in between. You have temperate grasslands on the other hand, and those would be the areas that are kind of in the green. And those are known for rich soil, abundant growth. Do you know what they call this part of America? They call that the breadbasket of America because that's where like all the wheat is grown, the corn, the grain, like that is prime farmland right there. Prime farmland. Really rich soil. And then you have the steppe grasslands, and these border on semi-arid deserts. So their grasses found are shorter and they lack trees except along riverbanks and streams. And the three main factors that maintain grasslands are low rainfall, wildfires, and grazing animals. The animals graze on the grass, and that actually helps the grass because then they poop on the grass and fertilizes the grass. And wildfires are not always bad. Wildfires are part of a normal cycle. And when that grass burns, it fertilizes the soil and more grass comes. And it's not abnormal for grasslands to catch fire and there to be massive fires that go on and on and on for days. You got to control it if it's approaching houses and businesses and things, right? But sometimes they will purposely burn land because it's part of maintaining its health. It's part of the process. So they're generally located between deserts and forests. You have major temperate grasslands that are located in the US, Uruguay, Argentina, Russia, and Mongolia. That's where you'll find most of them. And then the largest savanna is in Africa, right there, that purple one. Nearly half the continent is covered in savanna grasslands. So there's a couple times a year that's really wet. The rest of the year is dry. When you see pictures of like animals hunting in the savanna, the grass is usually brown, right? It's not usually bright green grass. It's because it's dry the rest of the year. All right, deserts. Now, deserts are interesting because we consider something a desert based on how much precipitation it receives, not on how cold or hot it is. So a desert is a dry terrestrial biome with very little rainfall, less than 50 centimeters each year. So deserts cover about a fifth of the Earth's surface, and they include arid deserts, which are hot and dry and occur at low latitudes around the world. We have semi-arid deserts, which are generally not as hot and dry as arid. Arid means dry, right? And they experience long summers, cool winters. Coastal deserts occur around the western edges of continents at the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, which are latitudes, right? And then you have cold deserts. Did you know that you can have a cold desert? So a cold desert will be ones that have low temperatures and long winters. And they occur in Arctic and Antarctic areas and above tree lines of mountain ranges, like the tundra. So, key characteristics of a desert biome are little rainfall, temperatures vary greatly between day and night, high evaporation rates, coarse textured soils, and drought resistant vegetation. Your cacti live in deserts because they are drought resistant vegetation. Little rainfall. The reason the temperatures vary greatly is because the air is dry. The reason it stays hot here at night in the summer is because our air is moist enough that that moisture holds the heat. If you go out and you could be out in Arizona, it'll be 100 degrees during the day. It could be 60 degrees at night. Because once the sun is gone, there is not enough moisture in the air to trap the heat. So it just gets nice and cool out. And in the winter, it can get very cold at night in a place like Phoenix, which is hot as heck during the day. Even during the winter, it's in the 70s, so that's interesting. All right. And high evaporation rates because it's so dry. So 5 largest deserts are Antarctic. Antarctica, the continent covered in ice, is our largest desert because it gets very little precipitation, even though it's cold. Then the Arctic, so at the North Pole, there you go. Also a desert. Did you know those poles covered in snow were deserts? Those are deserts. And then you've got the Sahara in Africa, which you've probably heard of because it's huge. The Arabian Desert, and there's the Arabian, and then the Gobi, which is there in Asia. And then you've got the smaller ones like over here in the American Southwest. So a tundra, if you look at the tundra, this is a biome that is a cold, frozen landscape. It has a short growing season followed by harsh conditions that plants and animals in the region need special adaptations to survive. Tundra winters are long, dark, cold. So these are places sometimes where you only get a few hours of daylight. If you're in your winter in the tundra, you may only get a few hours of daylight each day because of the way the earth is positioned. And they've got that permafrost. And so you've got an Arctic tundra, which is divided into Arctic and Antarctic tundras. And then you have an alpine tundra. And the alpine tundra is right here in the Europe, that little spot up there in Europe. And I think they count the Himalayas as an alpine tundra too, even though it's a different land mass there, a different land formation. So your tundra's treeless polar desert found in Alaska, Canada, Russia, Greenland, Iceland, Scandinavia, and sub-Antarctic islands. And now let's talk about aquatic biomes. All right, we've got different types of aquatic biomes, and we can divide them up into 3 main biomes, and then you can get even more specific. But an estuary is located along coasts where rivers meet saltwater oceans. Estuaries tend to have what you can call, in some areas, brackish water, which is like a little saltier. It's saltier than fresh water, but less salty than salt water. It's kind of a mix. So estuaries are where you've got rivers meeting the sea. Like our big estuaries are like, we've got them all along the coast, like where the Savannah River, if you've been to Savannah, where the Savannah River empties into the sea is an estuary. But where the Mississippi enters into the Gulf is a huge estuary, right? So each day as tide rises, salt water flows into the estuary, and likewise, fresh water flows down the rivers and creeks and mixes with the salt water, and estuaries can be surrounded by swamps, coral reefs, and beaches. Then we have fresh water. So these are communities of animals and plants in regions with less than 1% salt concentration. Freshwater biomes include lakes, rivers, ponds, streams, and some wetlands. So freshwater regions can be found on every single continent, cover 1/5 of the world. So freshwater biome, Lake Lanier, right? That's not saltwater, it's freshwater. And then marine, we call the saltwater biome marine. There's a difference between aquatic and marine. Aquatic means anything dealing with water. Marine means ocean, specifically saltwater. So these are the ones characterized by the presence of salt water. It's the largest biome in the world. And that makes sense, right? Because the oceans cover more of the world than land does. So our largest biome in the world is the marine biome. And it can, several types of ecosystems. You can have estuaries. Obviously, we talked about those that are along the edges of these. You've got salt marshes, mangrove forests, coral reefs, open ocean, and the deep sea ocean. They all have very different types of organisms that live in them. So let's go over these real quick. It is primarily climate conditions, temperature, and precipitation that determine the plants that grow in a region. The plants determine the animals that inhabit the region. Both plants and animals determine the ecosystems. So, warm summers, cold winters receives at least 50 centimeters of precipitation per year. What kind of biome is that? It's a deciduous forest. Hot in the daytime or cooler cold at night, very dry. Organisms are adapted to extreme temperatures and dry conditions. What biome is that? What you think, Emerson? Desert, very good. And then if you have warm, rainy summers, very cold winters with heavy snow, trees produce cones with seeds and are eaten by many animals. Do we know what that one is? Do you know, Emerson? Let's say the taiga or boreal forest. That one's taiga. So deciduous forests have a variety of habits. I think it's supposed to say habitats. Whoops. Because they have a wide variety of plant life. And the point along the shoreline between high and low tides is called the intertidal zone. Organisms in an intertidal zone face pounding waves, as well as sudden changes in temperature and water level. This is like you see your oysters and your barnacles and stuff. They live in your intertidal zone, and they get pounded on by waves, so their little shells keep them safe. Your neritic zone is rich in living things because sunlight passes through shallow water, allowing for photosynthesis to occur. Estuaries exist where fresh water meets salt water. And surface zone is out in the open ocean where light penetrates only a few hundred meters. So real quick, we got to go through this real fast. So studying populations, some methods of determining size and population are direct and indirect observations. So here's how we do it. A direct observation would be counting the crabs in the tide pool. That's direct. An indirect observation would be going, these are swallow nests. And typically 4 swallows live in each nest. So then you count these nests and you multiply it by 4, and that gives you an idea of how many swallows are in this population, right? So that's indirect. And then you've got sampling. So you can take a small area and you can count, for example, the number of birch trees in a small area and then multiply it so that it meets the size of a larger area. Like in 10 square feet, I have 6 birch trees, but in 100 square feet, I'm going to estimate that I then have, nobody was good. You have 6 of them in a 10-foot square, and then you have 10 of those 10-foot squares, you'd say, oh, I have 36. Oh, I have 36 birch trees. That's a way of estimating. And then we can do things like we can mark and capture. We can tag. Look at this guy. He's been tagged. See that? They've epoxied a radio antenna onto him. So you can follow this turtle and see where he goes, where she lays her eggs, maybe where he goes to eat, where he goes to breed. So if you have, this is, for example, how you do the sampling thing. If you have 12-meter by 7-meter vegetable garden, in 1 square meter, you find 2 toads. Estimate the population of toads in the whole garden. You would do it like so. 12 times 7 equals 84 meters. If it's 2 toads per square meter, 2 times 84, they're just going to keep filling in, and that would give you 168 toads. Now, the problem with this is there's going to be limited resources, and they probably are not going to realistically live like that because they need more space. Population can increase with a rise in birth rate or immigration, more toads moving into the vegetable patch, and it can decrease or rise with deaths or emigration if they leave. Changes in population size. This happens when members either enter a population or leave a population. So that can happen through birth and death, and it can also happen with immigration and emigration, moving in, moving out. So when the birth rate of a population is greater than the death rate, the population will increase. And if the birth rate is less than the death rate, the population will decrease. Immigration is exodus. You can think of that E, that is leaving. Emigration, exodus. Immigration is incoming, coming in. So animals coming in or coming out of an area changes the population. Population density is the number of individuals in an area, and then it is limited by resources: food, space, water. If you don't have enough water, you can't have more than the amount. You can't have more animals than the amount of water can sustain or the amount of food can sustain. You get problems with overpopulation. And we call that the carrying capacity, which is an ecosystem's ability to hold a certain number of species. Its carrying capacity is X number of white-tailed deer per square kilometer. And there'll be a number for that. That's been determined by research. So over time, looking at this graph, which I think you have this graph. So over time, which period did the squirrel population decrease? You can see it right there. In 1994, we had a decrease in squirrels. So if you read this map, you can follow the map up here. Over time, which population increased? Look at there, 1994 to 5. So 1994 to 5, 5 to 6, 6 to 7, we had more squirrels. In which year did the population reach its lowest point? 1994. Look at that. Only 225 squirrels. These are hundreds of squirrels, so about 225. And then what caused the change in population size? It can be when new members enter or when other members leave. And then if you wanted to explain one issue that could be limiting factor, you might say the amount of food. Maybe there just wasn't enough food for them all. So interactions among living things, we're going to talk more about this later, but all organisms are adapted to life. If you look here, let's just see the two short. Hey guys, keep it quiet for just a minute till I wrap up, okay? Sorry, I'm running a bit late. Those two short giraffes cannot reach the food. They're going to starve and die. Good one. And the taller ones will be able to eat the food and they will live. So this is what you'd call an adaptation, and we'll talk a lot more about that. So 3 major types of interactions within an ecosystem. We had competition, we had predation, when one organism kills another, and we have symbiosis, which is when both species are going to benefit. Sorry. Predators and prey. If you ever notice, where to go? If you ever notice predators, their eyes are on the front of their head. Prey animals, they're on the side so they can see behind them. And real quick, these are our types of symbiosis: mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. Mutualism, both people benefit, both species benefit. Commensalism, one benefits, but the other isn't affected at all. Parasitism is when one is harmed and the other is benefited. And let me see. Changes in communities, we're just going to real quick. Old houses torn down, small weeds and grasses grow in the vacant lot over the next few years. You get more creatures growing in. Basically, this is what you call succession. If you can see this if you're driving around in Forsyth County, because there's so much construction. If they level an area and they don't start building on it, first thing you're going to get are mosses, lichens, then short grasses. Then you get things like short flowers and plants like this. Then the pine trees come in and the hardwoods are last. So forests like this that have hardwoods in them are mature forests. Okay, I'll tell you this. I won't show you the video because we don't have time. But last year, we didn't have an opportunity to host our dance. We ran out of the ability to get our venue like we always have. So we will be holding a